Maybe you're asking yourself, what's happening to me? Why does everything feel like it's falling apart around me? Where is God? The answer no one told you, and maybe you don't even want to hear right now, is that this shaking, this pain, this chaos is the first step in something big that God is doing in your life. Yes, God is stirring the foundations, and it seems like what you fear the most, loss, suffering, discomfort, is exactly what He's using to take you to a better, higher, stronger place. What you're going through right now is not punishment, it's not payback, it's not God abandoning you. What you're feeling is a breakthrough that has a divine purpose. You're being prepared for something much bigger than your eyes can see and your heart can understand at this moment. Everything God touches, He transforms. And sometimes transformation begins with breaking. That's what you're living right now. The tearing down of your old foundations so He can build something more solid, more steady, more enduring. Back in Genesis, God calls Abraham and says, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household and go to the land I will show you." Genesis 12:1. He didn't hand Abraham a map or tell him where he'd end up, just a direction. Abraham had to leave without knowing exactly what was waiting for him. He had to let go of everything familiar, his comfort zone, to follow God's voice. God doesn't give the certainty of what's coming, but He does give the certainty that He is in control. And that's exactly what's happening with you. Your ground is shaking because what's being built in your life needs to rest on a foundation that isn't human, one that doesn't depend on what you can see or control. When everything starts to crumble and your certainties collapse, you feel the pain of loss. But if you look with eyes of faith, you'll realize that loss is actually deliverance. God is pulling you out of a place where you can't grow anymore, and He's preparing you for something deeper and longer lasting. Are you watching doors slam shut, relationships fall apart, your peace gets stolen? Understand this. None of that means God has abandoned you. It means He's taking you to a new level. He's cutting the ropes to what felt comfortable to guide you onto a new path, the path of faith. And faith isn't seen, isn't touched. Faith is lived in the unseen, in what you don't see yet, but choose to trust. When everything starts to fall, that's when God is closest, adjusting every piece, every plan. Maybe you lost a job, a friend, or even your sense of direction. Maybe it's so hard right now that nothing makes sense. But it's exactly in this moment, in the middle of the chaos, that God is at work. When you feel you have no strength left, He becomes strong in you. Because this shaking isn't about destruction, it's about construction. And God's building isn't like ours. It isn't based on bricks and visible walls. God builds in the heart, in the soul, in the intentions. He plants inside us. Do you feel lost, directionless? That's often the first feeling someone has in the middle of a great transformation. What looks like chaos is actually aligning everything to God's divine purpose for you. He's rearranging your structure so you won't stay where you are. He's laying a new foundation, one far steadier than anything you could build on your own. God isn't going to leave you where you are. He won't let you keep living on the surface with a fragile faith that shakes at the first gust of wind. He's calling you to something greater, but for that you have to leave your comfort zone. You have to break with what keeps you bound. And I know it hurts. I know the fear is real. I know feeling like you're losing control is overwhelming. But the moment you lose control is the moment God takes the wheel. He doesn't ask for permission, He just starts to work. Have you been resisting these changes? Trying to hold together what's falling apart, to glue back what's being broken? If so, know this may be your biggest mistake. When God starts removing what no longer serves you, the worst thing you can do is cling with all your might to what He's already decided to take away. Because He knows what you need to grow. He knows where He's leading you. You won't understand it now, but down the road, you'll look back and see that every pain had a purpose. Resisting this change is really resisting God's plan. You're not losing, you're being prepared. What you call loss, God calls transition. What you see as the destruction of something you loved, God sees as the construction of something far greater and far more enduring. Don't cling to what's collapsing. Don't hold on to what has passed. What God has for you is much bigger, and the best is still ahead. Trust, even when you don't understand. The Lord never shakes us without a purpose. Have you felt abandoned? Have you prayed with everything in you, begging for an answer, and nothing came? Heaven seems closed, and God's silence screams inside you. When answers don't arrive, when all you want is a sign, a word, some relief, and nothing happens. What you don't realize is that God's silence is not absence. God's silence is preparation. Believe me, this is one of the most intense and decisive moments in your walk with Him. When God is silent, He doesn't forget you. On the contrary, it's in the silence that He works deeply in you. Have you noticed that when storms are raging, it can be easier to hear God? But what about when everything is quiet and all you feel is your own anxiety? The emptiness of not knowing what to do, the anguish of not understanding why. That's exactly when God is closer than you think. He doesn't hide. He teaches you to walk by faith, not by feelings. He wants you to learn to trust Him, not what can be seen or felt. Joseph in Genesis 40 is a powerful example of this. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave, slandered and imprisoned though he'd done nothing wrong. He spent years behind bars with no word of comfort, no promise of release. But in that absolute silence, God was shaping him. Joseph wasn't in trouble. He was in training to govern Egypt. God's silence wasn't abandonment. It was a deep process of construction. God was building in him the character necessary for the great calling ahead. Joseph saw no sign from God, heard no voice, yet he stayed faithful. He trusted even when heaven was silent. That's where the pain feels hardest to bear. When God doesn't answer, when He says nothing. Have you felt that way? When your prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling, when you feel like you're speaking into a void and the void answers back. The lack of answers makes us doubt, makes us wonder if we're being heard, if God cares, if He's still there. But it's in that silence that our faith is most radically tested. You know, the real kind of faith isn't the kind that shows up when everything's going well, when blessings are visible and all is in place. Real faith is the faith that stands firm when nothing happens, when there are no signs, when the heavens seem shut. And that's exactly what God is doing in you through the silence. He's forming a faith that doesn't depend on circumstances. He's teaching you to walk not by sight, but by trusting Him, by His word. There, in the silence, your soul is led to surrender. You stop chasing feelings and start trusting, even when you can't see, even when you can't feel. As Psalm 23:4 says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The promise isn't the absence of suffering, it's the presence of God, even in the silence. He is with you in the quiet and the waiting, forging in you an unshakable faith, one not conditioned by what you see, but anchored in what you believe. Here's the reality check you need. God hasn't abandoned you. He loves you so much that He wants to teach you to trust Him without relying on instant answers or visible miracles. He wants to bring you to a place where His word alone is enough to sustain you, where, even in the silence, you can rest, knowing He's working in you. God's silence is preparation for something much greater than you can see right now. Can you feel it? The tension, the emptiness, the ache? You know what that is? It's your soul being transformed. It's your spirit being strengthened. Because God's real preparation doesn't happen in the moments of celebration. It happens in the hours of silence when nothing seems to be moving. Yet He's working in the parts of you no one else can see. The pain of silence, the discomfort of waiting. This isn't punishment. It's spiritual training. And when God finally speaks, His voice will be clearer, stronger, louder than ever before. You'll understand at last that the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with God's power. So if you're in that silent season where it feels like God isn't speaking, don't rush it. Don't give up. Don't grumble. Keep walking, keep seeking, because the silence will pass. And when it does, you'll realize God was closer than ever. He was preparing something in you that couldn't be done any other way. He was shaping your faith, your character, and your confidence so you could carry what's ahead. And when the silence ends, you will see God's glory revealed, not just in words, but in action. Have you ever felt the ground drop out from under you when everything you relied on suddenly disappears? Maybe it was the job that made you feel secure, the friendships you thought were forever, or a relationship you believed was the rock beneath your feet, and suddenly it's gone. What you used to do to keep your life standing starts slipping through your fingers like sand. It's scary, isn't it? Despair creeps in and you ask, what am I going to do now? How do I make it without all this? But what if I told you that this loss, this emptiness, isn't a curse, but a calling? God uses scarcity to teach you one of the deepest lessons of the Christian life, how to live by faith. We humans tend to trust what's visible, tangible, controllable. We think our security comes from what we have or from our ability to hold everything together. But in His infinite love, God allows our sources to run dry to show us that our true source isn't human resources. It's God Himself. When everything you know and trust fades, your first reaction is fear. Fear you won't be able to go on, that you won't know how to move forward. But here's the key. The emptiness, the lack, the helplessness, this is the perfect soil where God wants to plant something new. He uses what you have and what you don't have to teach you to depend only on Him. When you have nothing left to lean on, when doors close, that's when you finally start to learn how to live by faith. God won't leave you in scarcity without a purpose. He doesn't put you in places of lack to humiliate you, but to lift you. Look at the prophet Elijah in 1 Kings 17. God sent him to the brook Cherith, where God fed him with bread and meat brought by ravens and gave him water from the stream. Elijah needed nothing else. But one day the brook dried up and the ravens stopped bringing food. What did Elijah do? He didn't panic. He didn't accuse God. He trusted. God hadn't abandoned him. He was preparing Elijah for the next step. The Lord told him, "Now go to Zarephath, and there a widow would sustain him." The miracle didn't come until Elijah moved in God's direction. That change of scene wasn't punishment. It was a new level of faith. When things dry up and scarcity surrounds you, understand that God is calling you to trust a source you can't see, a source you can't control. That's the kind of faith He's teaching you. It's not about what you have, it's about who you have. And who you have is the Creator of heaven and earth, who never leaves His people forsaken. Here's the real impact of this truth. Scarcity isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new way to live. The fabled natural person looks at lack and sees defeat. The person of faith looks at lack and sees an opportunity to witness God's hand move in ways they never imagined. Scarcity is where miracles happen. When there's nowhere else to turn, that's when God starts doing the impossible. He wants you to walk not by sight but by trust. This season of scarcity might feel terrifying at first. The feeling of emptiness, of having no direction, no resources, it hurts. But it's in that emptiness that God begins to fill you with what the world can't give. He'll teach you to trust Him in ways you never thought possible. It won't be about your plans anymore or human strategies, but about following His voice and walking in His way. And you know what's even more amazing? The miracle doesn't come first, it comes after. God's provision doesn't show up while you're still clutching what you have. It shows up when you move toward what He has for you. It's in that step of faith that God reveals His provision. He wants you to step before you see the ground, just like He did with Elijah. Only those who walk by faith get to see God's power manifest. When your provisions run dry, fear will try to dominate you. The enemy will whisper, "You're alone. You don't have what you need anymore. The promise failed." But the truth is, God never fails. He's teaching you to trust Him, not your resources. He's kicking away your crutches and preparing you to live a life where He is your only security, where His power shows up right in your weakness. So instead of fighting scarcity, learn to walk through it. When everything looks lost, when your account is at zero and you have no idea what to do, look up. The same God who fed Elijah by ravens, the same God who fed the widow of Zarephath, is the God who will sustain you. He will never leave you. And when this process is over, you won't be the same. Your faith will be stronger, deeper, unshakable. You'll understand clearly that no matter what you lack on the outside, if you have God, you have everything you need. What you're living now is training. God is teaching you to live by faith, to trust Him in every area of your life. And when this training is over, you'll be able to carry something far beyond what you imagined, because you learn to depend not on things, but on God Himself. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted deeply? Someone who stood by you one moment and turned their back the next? The pain of betrayal feels like a punch straight to the soul, doesn't it? It's not just the loss, it's the shock, the sting of watching someone you welcomed and trusted hurt you so cruelly. In the middle of that pain, you start to question, how did God let this happen? Where was He when I needed Him most? This isn't fair. How do I move forward from here? Here's the raw truth you may not want to hear. God allows betrayal to purify you, to free you from people, situations, and relationships that aren't part of His plan for you. I know it's hard, but listen, betrayal is a tool God uses to prepare you for your purpose. When someone betrays you, it's not that God failed, it's that He's showing you your identity cannot be rooted in people, only in Him. Jesus gave us the clearest example. He was betrayed by Judas, one of His closest disciples. Judas wasn't a stranger, not an outsider. He was part of Jesus' inner circle, and Jesus knew it. But He didn't retaliate in anger or seek revenge. He didn't veer from His purpose. He didn't run from the pain. In His sovereignty, Jesus even used Judas's betrayal to fulfill the plan of salvation for humanity. He didn't let Judas's act change who he was or what he came to do. That's what you need to understand. The pain of betrayal isn't the end of your story. It's part of the purification process. God allows betrayal to teach you that your worth, your identity, and your approval don't come from people, but from Him. When someone turns their back on you, God is showing you that you can't depend on anyone to make you whole. Only He is your source. Only He is your sustainer. What you perceive as loss, God is using to free you from an attachment that would never lead you to His purpose. Feel the weight of this truth. When you're betrayed, you're placed at a crossroads of deep reflection. You begin to see that while you were tied up in people, their approval and validation, you were losing the true peace that only comes from God. Betrayal teaches you to depend on God alone. It frees you from false expectations of others. You can't bank on human loyalty. You need to rely on divine faithfulness. In His wisdom, God allows betrayal so you can see who's truly with you and who isn't. He exposes false alliances, friendships, and relationships that don't belong to His purpose for your life. That revelation can be painful, but it's necessary. God uses that pain to purify you and prepare you for the next phase of your journey. He will remove what doesn't serve you, so you'll have room to receive what He has for you. Maybe you're holding tight to the pain of betrayal, letting it dominate your thoughts and heart. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't have to be what destroys you. It can be the key to your freedom. Instead of nursing bitterness, let God work in you. He allows the wound so that when you come out the other side, you're stronger, purer, and more focused on what He has for you. Remember Joseph, again, betrayed by his own brothers, sold as a slave, left for dead. But it was through that betrayal that he was brought to Egypt, where he would become governor. Without his brother's betrayal, he would never have reached the destiny God had prepared, and instead of taking revenge, Joseph forgave. That forgiveness elevated him to a new level of authority and power. Betrayal didn't destroy him. it promoted him. So if you're facing betrayal, if you're hurting from the ingratitude of those who stood by you, know that God is using this to filter your path. He's removing everything that doesn't serve his greater purpose for you. Betrayal isn't defeat, it's separation. Don't fight what God is doing. Don't cling to what he has decided to remove from your life. Trust that he's freeing you, preparing you for something you can't see yet, but that's closer than you think. The enemy will try to convince you that betrayal is the end of the road. But the truth is, it's the beginning of something new, something bigger. God never leaves his children in a process without a purpose. And his purpose for you is great, powerful, and eternal. It doesn't matter who betrayed you or what you lost. What matters is who is calling you to a greater purpose, and he won't leave you behind. So when betrayal comes, look at it through the eyes of faith. Face that pain as a chance to grow. God is purifying you for something greater. Don't let betrayal define you. Let God use it to shape you, to prepare you for the future he has for you. In the end, those who remain faithful in pain will be lifted up, and God never ever wastes a pain he allowed. Have you found yourself in the middle of a totally unjust attack? When you're doing things right, living honestly, walking God's path, and suddenly you're attacked by people who don't even know what they're talking about? It feels absurd, doesn't it? You ask, what did I do wrong? Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. The reality is that you're often attacked precisely because you're on the right track. The attack isn't a sign that God left you. On the contrary, it's evidence that he chose you, and the enemy is trying to stop you before you get where God wants to take you. An unjust attack is one of the most intense trials. You're accused of something you didn't do, and the emotional impact is brutal. Being misunderstood, criticized, even slandered for no reason. It makes you ask, God, where are you in all this? But the truth is, God is more present than ever. He isn't just watching the attack. He's using it to forge something in you that couldn't be formed any other way. Look at David. He was anointed by God to be king of Israel, but instead of being welcomed, he was relentlessly hunted by Saul, the king still on the throne. David had done nothing wrong. He didn't challenge Saul, didn't plot against him, but Saul's hatred and jealousy chased him without rest. And what did David do? He didn't rebel. He didn't fight Saul. David had opportunities to kill Saul, but he refused. He said, I will not lay my hand on the Lord's anointed. 1 Samuel 24:6. He knew God had chosen Saul for that moment, and that God's timing is perfect. David's posture teaches us something profound. When you are attacked unjustly, the greatest test isn't the attack, it's your response. God allows you to face these moments to teach you to trust him more deeply. He doesn't want you to fight in your own strength. He wants you to rest in his justice. He's shaping in you a true spiritual authority that doesn't come from striving, but from integrity, from staying faithful when everything is against you. Here's the reality check. Many times God allows attacks precisely because he's preparing something huge for your life. He doesn't want to see you suffer, but he knows that those he uses most powerfully are the ones who, in the face of injustice, choose integrity. It's in the fire of adversity that true strength is forged. The attacks, the slander, the criticism, God is using all of it to prepare you for his purpose. They are not signs of defeat. They're signs you're on the right path. Think of Jesus. He was attacked, slandered, betrayed, abandoned. He went through it all without striking back, without trying to justify himself. That's why he's our model. Jesus shows us that when we're attacked for no reason, we have the chance to grow in humility, spiritual authority, and faith. He teaches that our response isn't to fight for our own justice, but to trust that God is working for us. True strength doesn't come from our ability to defend ourselves. It comes from our ability to rest in God's perfect plan. Maybe you're under attack right now. Someone's spreading lies about you, being criticized by people who don't even know you, feeling wronged. God has called you to live with integrity, and no matter how many attacks come, he will protect you. You don't have to defend yourself. He is with you. Real spiritual authority comes from your ability to remain faithful when the world tries to knock you down. And when God chooses to open doors and promote you, you'll look back and see the attack wasn't a roadblock. It was the process that took you closer to His purpose. Understand this. While the world tries to stop you, God is preparing you for something greater. Every unjust attack is an opportunity to grow, to mature, to get stronger. God allows it not to make you suffer, but to build in you something that can't be built any other way. He's forming a kind of authority in you that can't be destroyed by other people's words or actions. He's preparing you to reign, not with earthly power, but with spiritual strength. So don't rage against the attacks. Don't retaliate. Let God move. Like David, know that God is your defender, and His plan for your life is bigger than any injustice you face. The attack isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your rise. And when God's timing comes, you'll see His choice was perfect, and that you weren't attacked for nothing. You were chosen, and what's ahead is more glorious than you can imagine. Have you looked around and watched everything you depended on, your job, your financial security, your relationships, simply disappear? You never thought scarcity would arrive like this. Suddenly, overwhelmingly, without warning. Fear rushes in and you ask, how do I keep going? Where is God when I need provision most? The sense of being abandoned can feel unbearable, but what if I told you that lack, emptiness, and scarcity aren't signs that God forgot you? What if I told you He's actually doing something far greater than you can see? When everything you recognize as provision runs dry, it's because God is taking you to a new level of faith. He's pulling you out of your comfort zone, where you trusted human sources, to show you that the true source of everything you need isn't your strength, but His. Scarcity isn't the end. It's the transition to total dependence on God. It's the moment He calls you to walk by faith, not by your guarantees or material safety. And that's where the miracle begins. Remember the prophet Elijah in 1 Kings 17. God sent him to the brook Cherith and fed him with bread and meat brought by ravens, with water from the stream. Elijah needed nothing else. But suddenly, the stream dried up. Did God abandon him? No. God sent him to Zarephath, where a widow would sustain him. What looked like the end of provision was actually a new beginning, a new level of faith. The prophet had no idea what was next, but God did. Provision didn't show up until Elijah took the step of faith. Now picture your own version of that story. Your source, what always sustained you, your base, starts to dry up. Doors close. Fear closes in. But what if God isn't leaving you? What if He's preparing you for something you never imagined? When provision dries up, it's not God failing. It's His invitation for you to trust Him more deeply, more intensely, more supernaturally. Scarcity teaches you to live by faith, and faith isn't based on natural resources or conditions. The faith God wants to form in you isn't about what's in your hand. It's about what you believe He can do with what you have. Or even when you have nothing. It's in that emptiness that God starts to work, because real provision from God isn't visible. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It depends on His word. It seems impossible, doesn't it? Our human minds try to make sense of it, but God's plan doesn't fit human logic. He wants you to trust the invisible, to believe what isn't seen yet. He'll lead you through this desert where you feel alone, where resources are scarce, where the ground is dry and hard. But at the same time, He's teaching you to depend on Him, not on the sources you've known. In the desert, He is your water. In the emptiness, He is your bread. And when you trust Him, you'll see miracles, not before, but after your step of faith. Here's the reality check. God doesn't work the way we expect. He doesn't kick off the miracle with abundance. He starts with lack. When everything you had disappears, God will show you He doesn't rely on your reserves, your calculations, or what you hold. He is the source, and He never runs dry. Your job is to keep walking by faith. He doesn't want you living by human plans. He wants you living by His living, powerful word. When you learn to trust God, you're no longer dependent on this world's things. You're dependent on Him, and He is more than enough. You might ask, how will I survive if the provision dries up? Him for good? You'll survive because His word never fails. He will always lead you to the next step. You might be without resources today, unsure about tomorrow, but just as God sustained Elijah and the widow, He will provide, not the way you expect, but in a far more powerful, supernatural way. He will teach you to live by His word, and the provision will come in His perfect timing. And when the scarcity gives way to the supernatural, you'll realize it was never about what you lost. It was about what you learned to trust. What looked like your greatest crisis will become your greatest victory, because you'll come out stronger, steadier, more dependent on God. You'll see that when you had nothing left to hold on to, you still had everything in His word. In the end, you'll understand that scarcity wasn't a roadblock. It was preparation to live in the supernatural. God doesn't abandon you when provision runs dry. He calls you to trust more deeply. The miracle comes when you walk by faith, not by sight. He's calling you to that path. He's training you not to survive but to reign, not to live on crumbs, but in the fullness of His grace and provision. It's in the desert that you learn to trust, and it's in the desert that God will surprise you with what He can do with what you have. Have you ever felt like you were at the end of the road, like everything around you was collapsing and God's promise for your life was distant, almost out of reach? The pain, the suffering, the losses, it all seemed to point to an ending, didn't it? You look at your life and ask, where is the answer? Where is God's promise? When everything feels lost and you don't know where to turn, that's exactly when God begins to move powerfully, revealing what He's been preparing behind the scenes of your pain. What you call the end, God calls the beginning. What you see as defeat, He sees as preparation for the greatest victory of your life. When you hit rock bottom with no strength left and no visible answers, that's when He starts writing a story that will reveal His glory undeniably. In the silence, in the waiting, in the pain, He's preparing something bigger than you can imagine. What looked like punishment is actually the forging process for something grand that's about to happen. Have you read the story of Job? He was a righteous man who loved God, fully obedient, and he had everything taken from him, his children, his possessions, his health. Everything was destroyed. During his suffering, he questioned everything. He couldn't understand why he was in so much pain. But in His sovereign love, God used that suffering to bring Job into a deeper intimacy with Him. What looked like the end of Job's story was actually the moment of God's greatest revelation in his life. At the end of it all, Job said, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Job 42:5. Job's suffering wasn't in vain. He became a living witness of God's power and faithfulness. What looked like an ending became the beginning of a new, deeper relationship with God, more intimate, more transformative. That's what you need to understand about your own journey. When everything seems lost, when you see no way out, God isn't abandoning you. He's preparing you for something you never imagined. God's answer may take time, His silence may hurt, but when He finally reveals Himself, He brings far more than you could hope for. He didn't make you walk through all of this for nothing. Every tear, every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer has been preparing the ground for a glorious answer. When you're at your lowest, not knowing what to do, that's when God begins to move. He won't leave you in pain without purpose. What you call the end may just be the beginning of what God has for you. Maybe you're thinking, "I can't take it anymore. I don't know if I can keep going." But the Holy Spirit whispers, "Keep going. You're closer than you think. You're being prepared for something far greater than you can see right now." Here's the turning point. God isn't going to leave you behind. He won't leave you alone in the process. The pain you're feeling isn't pointless. When God's answer arrives, it brings authority, peace, and wisdom you couldn't have gained any other way. The process was necessary. The waiting was necessary. The suffering was necessary. Because God doesn't just want to give you an answer, He wants to transform your life, lifting you to a new level of intimacy with Him, of authority, of faith. And when that answer comes, you'll look back and see that every moment of pain and every unanswered prayer prepared you to live in the fullness of His promise. You'll see that God's silence wasn't rejection, it was preparation. He was working behind the scenes, shaping your heart and preparing your mind and soul for what He has for you. What you call loss, God calls opportunity. What you call an ending, God calls a beginning. So if today you feel like you're at the bottom, wondering how to go on, remember the end isn't the end. Silence isn't the absence of God. He's working in you in ways you can't see right now, but that will be revealed in His perfect time. What you're facing today is positioning you for something great, something you'll only see when your faith is strong enough to look beyond what your eyes can see. And at the right time, God will show you that all the pain, all the silence, the entire process was just preparation for the answer He has for you. A glorious answer that will reveal His faithfulness, His love, and His power in your life. God hasn't left you. He has prepared you, and the best is yet to come. If you're here, it's because you're seeking wisdom and growth, seeking to understand God's plans for your life. And that's a beautiful thing. The journey you're on, even through difficulties and challenges, is shaping you for something greater. I want to congratulate you for your perseverance and for your desire to learn and be strengthened in the Christian faith. Now, I'd like to ask a favor. If this video touched your heart and made you reflect, leave a comment below. Even if you don't know what to say, just write, "I am grateful to God." That helps us know who stayed to the end, and it lets you share what God is doing in your life. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't miss the chance to be part of this journey of faith with us. Subscribe to the channel to keep receiving uplifting messages that can further strengthen your walk with God. And if you feel led to support our channel, consider becoming a member and helping us carry this mission even further. Lastly, I'm leaving 2 recommended videos for you with more deep reflections on the Christian faith. I'm sure they'll build you up and help you keep growing. May God bless you powerfully, and may His peace continue to accompany you every step of the way. See you in the next video.